If you've got a school where it is very win-lose, power-oriented, my way or the highway kind of thing. Even when you've got teachers who really like kids, they are genuinely committed to kids succeeding, you still have this power dynamic where it's based on rules and punishment. It's got that gotcha mentality. I caught you doing this, now I have to do something bad to you, you pay the penalty, and then we start over. Typically, there's not a lot of learning there, and what I see are a lot of compensation behaviors. That's where we get, I didn't do it, or she started it, or all of these kind of behaviors. Do you know what kind of an environment you have to have for a kid to come up to you and say, you know, I really blew it. I messed up. I was in a school with a friend of mine who was a principal of a high school up in Wisconsin. He was at the time. And they were having a dance, and the two of us were sitting in this cafeteria which was just down the hall from where the dance was. There were a bunch of kids in this cafeteria. And as we're talking, one of the kids came over to my friend, the principal, and he said, I'm really sorry. I was leaning on the end of the table, and I think I broke it. Now, and the principal just looked at him and said, oh, well, you know, these things are really flimsy. Let me see, did anybody get hurt? That was his first concern. No, everybody's okay. He said, thanks for telling me. I'll have it taken care of tomorrow. Now, this was a very casual, he comes back and we're talking, resumes the conversation, and I said, no, wait a minute, you have to get what just happened here. Do you know what kind of trust has to occur for this kid to come over and say, I just broke some school equipment. I'm really sorry. To take responsibility for doing something. We always say we want the kids to take responsibility for their behaviors, and yet how many of them can come and say, I made a mistake, I blew it, I didn't have this, I didn't do that, I broke something, I lost my temper, whatever. And us saying to them, all right, how are we going to make it right? Or, okay, that's not your responsibility, we'll take care of it, or that's no big deal, or whatever alternatives, whatever. It's just there has to be a certain energy dynamic, and that doesn't typically happen in a school that is, okay, well, what's the penalty? Now you have to get this punishment. What's the, you know, we call them consequences, but they're all punitive. It's always, what bad thing do we have to do to you now that we caught you, or that you were stupid enough to confess? Because teachers in our culture, in our tradition, the notion that if a child does something bad, I have to make it very uncomfortable for him, that's a very, very well entrenched tradition. And it's really, we start thinking, well, if we don't do that, if we don't make it hurt for them, if we don't make it painful, we're not doing our jobs. Well, again, what's our intention? What are we doing here? Is this a teachable moment? Is this an opportunity for the kid to learn? If you break it, fix it. That's very different from, if you break it, I have to hurt you now, you go pay a penalty. Meanwhile, the thing's still broken. Meanwhile, the child didn't learn a better way of dealing with his peers, or handling the furniture, or handling the equipment, or managing his time, or whatever our long-term goals are. What's our intention? So the behavioral issues, what happens to me when I blow it? What happens to me when I forget my library book? What happens to me when I didn't bring my homework in, or when I lost my books, or when I left something in the car, or when I left something on the bus? What happens to me? Do I have to get hurt, or do I simply have to take responsibility or be accountable for the outcomes of that behavior and make it better? That has a huge impact on the emotional climate of a school.